Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Amma ba'du fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. In our previous class, we were studying different roots, and during the process of learning about different roots that appear in Surah Al-Fatiha, we came upon a verse of the Holy Quran that talks about the concept of polygamy. Marrying more than once or having more than one wife at a time is basically called polygamy. And then we were discussing that verse, and I was mentioning the background, the context, and different aspects and issues related to that matter. And last time when we concluded our Quran class, we decided that inshallah ta'ala the same topic will continue for this class, and anybody who may have any questions inshallah ta'ala will address those. And I mentioned that I'm going to address the concept of adl, the concept of justice when it comes to the matter of polygamy. When you read the verses of the Holy Quran on a certain subject, you should read them in their entirety. Don't just take one verse, but take all the verses on a specific subject, take all the ahadith, and then take the fatawa, the writings of the Promised Messiah alayhi salam, and then what the khulafa have written on those issues as well. When you do that, a certain image comes to your mind about the concept of polygamy. Promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, he states that Islam has not made it incumbent on every male to marry more than once. He said this is not an imperative, this is not a hukam that you have to marry more than once. Rather, it is a permission for those who may need it. You see, in Christianity, no matter what happens, the husband and wife are not allowed to divorce themselves. The husband cannot have a second wife, and they cannot be separated from each other. And the only way for separation to take place is if fornication or adultery has happened. Basically, if one of the spouse has been unfaithful to the other, and then and only then in that case, divorce can be granted. In Islam, that's not the case. In Islam, Allah Ta'ala says that, it's possible that two individuals, their personality clash, that their personality does not match. When two people come together and they start living together as husband and wife, over time they realize that their personality is not matching. And all the time they're fighting. And instead of them living together, serving the purpose of marriage, which is to attain peace of mind from each other, what they are getting from each other is the exact opposite of it. That their life is becoming more of a hell day by day than it becoming paradise. Then there are certain cases where the wife does not like the husband. There is a narration where a lady came to Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she said that, Ya Rasulullah, I don't find my husband attractive. She was married to this person and she came to Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, I don't find him attractive. And Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked her, okay, so what do you want to do? And her response was, I don't want to live with him, I want separation. And Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam granted her separation. Khula. These things are not found in other religions. And there is a reason why other religions are incomplete and they're not perfect. But Islam and Quran is. Because in Islam, the Holy Quran takes every possible angle, every possible aspect. It's possible that certain things may not apply on you. For example, polygamy is not for everyone. The very verse that talks about polygamy, Allah Ta'ala says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ Allah ta'dilu fawahida. If you think, along these words basically, that if you think you're not going to be able to, deal with your spouses justly, then just marry once. Don't marry more than once. Now look at the concept of justice that Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ is saying that Islam puts forward. He says, Muhabbat ko balaye taak rakh ke. Leaving love, the aspect of love aside, he says you're supposed to be just to all of your wives. If you have 1, 2, 3, or 4, you're supposed to be just in every single aspect of life. They all must have their own house. You cannot have multiple wives living under the same roof. That's not allowed. So if you want to have more than one wife, be mentally prepared and physically and financially to be able to provide for them separately. You cannot have 2 wives or 3 wives or 4 wives living under the same roof. So this is the very first thing that one has to keep in mind. Secondly, he says, whatever you give to one wife, you must give to the second, the third, and the fourth. Whatever you clothe them with, same level of clothing and same level of, expenses must be borne on behalf of all of them. And then he says it goes on to the extent that when it comes to basically, the private and personal physical relationship between husband and wife, Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ said that even in that aspect you have to execute justice. The amount you spend with one wife, you have to spend the same amount with the other, regardless of who your favorite wife is. When you start looking at the prerequisites for polygamy, it paints a completely different picture than the one that some of you might have had in your mind. That polygamy means I have the right to marry up to 4 times. Perfect. I can have more than one wife. But when you start looking at what comes with this, you realize, in the words of Prophet Muhammad Islam, that it might even be better to stay by yourself than to actually marry. And marry up to 4 times. So polygamy is not something which is to be practiced for carnal desires, for physical pleasure. Because if that is the intent, then it becomes a sin. So what are the grounds on which polygamy is actually allowed and in certain cases encouraged? For example, there was a time when Prophet Messiah ﷺ encouraged the members of his Jamaat to marry more than once, so that our Jamaat can increase at a rapid pace. Because this is the Jamaat which is going to become the dominant face of true Islam on this earth. Humanity is going to be won over by the servants that come forth from this Jamaat, inshallah. But then Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ has explained to us that if you are one of those who cannot execute justice, or sometimes some people say that they have the desire to marry more than once, but physically speaking they're not capable of having more than one wife. For such an individual to say, I want to have more than one wife, is ridiculous. If medically, physically you're not fit to have more than one wife, and then you say that because Islam says I can have more than one wife, I want to have more than one wife, that is ridiculous claim on your part then. Prophet Muhammad Islam says sometimes the wife happens to get a certain disease. She becomes sick with such a disease, and then he named a few diseases. I'm not going to go into details, and all of this information is available in Fiqh al-Masih. The book is available online on alislam.org. He goes on to explaining some of the diseases that women may get. And then Hazur says, as a result of those diseases, they're practically almost at a point where they cannot have physical relations with their husband. If a husband and wife living together under the same roof, both have rights towards each other, not just financially speaking, not just emotionally speaking, but physically as well. There are certain rights that man has to execute towards his wife, and then there are certain rights that the woman has to execute towards her husband. If the woman physically becomes unable to or disabled in a way that she cannot execute the rights of her husband, in those cases, if the husband is told that no, you cannot marry more than once, and when there is a legitimate physical need on his part to have a spouse that he could have physical relations with, and you tell that individual, your wife is sick, too bad. And it's not a sickness such as flu or fever. Nothing like that. This is a kind of disease that can remain with an individual for maybe years on at a time. If the individual is mentally and physically strong enough to control himself, then that's fine. But if the individual is not strong enough, then what is that individual going to do? To be honest, such an individual would then start looking at other women unlawfully, places where he shouldn't be, doing business with people he shouldn't be doing business with. There are many, many other reasons that Promised Messiah ﷺ has mentioned. But then Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ has also mentioned this issue from the aspect of women as well, from their side as well. Oftentimes when men are talking about polygamy, they talk about polygamy from the men's side, but they forget about the aspect of the women's side as well. Their aspect oftentimes get neglected. Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ mentioned that if your first wife is there, and for whatever legitimate reason you want to have a second spouse, but your first wife, you think that it is going to hurt her, and it is something that she will not be able to bear. And if you think that you can physically restrain yourself so as not to go and have a second spouse, for example, in the case, let's say that the woman is sick, and let's say she's sick for 10 years, and there's nothing that the man can physically do with his wife. At that time, if the man, only for the sake of his first wife, he says, I'm not going to marry another woman. I will control myself as much as I can. I will give my 100% and I will control myself. I will suppress my desires. I will suppress my needs. Just because I don't want my wife's feelings to be hurt. Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ mentioned that if he can do that, then so be it. But if he thinks that he will not be able to suppress his desires and suppress his needs, and instead he might end up doing something which the Sharia forbids, then that would be wrong for him to not marry at that time. Some women say that they cannot fathom that their husband may marry another woman. Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ has addressed this issue as well. He said, woman has the right. Every woman has the right, every girl has the right, that at the time of the nikah, before the nikah takes place, every girl and every woman has the right to ask of their future husband that under no circumstances will you be allowed to have another wife. She has the right to basically have that part of the contract per se. If she chooses to have that contract with her husband to be, and the husband then goes on and he marries another woman, then the punishment of breaking the contract would be applicable on that individual, whatever the punishment be, in the form of fine or whatever it is. But if the woman does not enter this agreement, and a genuine need, remember we're talking about genuine need, we're not talking about some fellow who says, okay, well, I like that girl, I want to marry her, I like that girl today, I want to marry her as well. No, that's not allowed. So if a woman has not entered a contract, prenuptial basically, about this condition. And then the husband, based on genuine needs and legitimate reasons, wants to have another spouse, then at that time she cannot hold this against him, that why are you marrying? Then there are other aspects to this issue as well. What I want to do is I also want to open the floor for Q&A session, so that as many questions as you would like to ask on this subject, I will try my level best, inshallah ta'ala, to answer those questions. There was another thing I wanted to mention from the writings of Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam. And yes, Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam mentioned that this isn't for everyone. It is possible that there is an individual who has first wife, and for the legitimate and right reasons, the husband wants to have another wife. And his first wife is okay with it. The husband is okay with it. The first wife is okay with it. The second wife to be, she has the option of saying no, that no, I don't want to marry you. You already have a wife. But if she also agrees to enter a polygamous marriage, if she is also in agreement to enter a polygamous marriage, who is person XYZ to say that no, you cannot do this? It is not your matter. It is a personal matter of the individual. So it has to be looked upon case by case. There isn't any blanket statement that can be made that, okay, well, everybody should do it, so on and so forth. It has to be looked upon from case by case or need by need basis. Let me reiterate once again. Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam has mentioned, if you were to realize the level of responsibilities which are placed upon the shoulder of the man who enters in polygamous marriage, if you were to realize the level of justice you have to execute if you enter polygamous relationship, you would rather choose to stay celibate by yourself and not marry at all. Because executing justice is one of the prerequisites to basically enter polygamous relationship. As you mentioned, sometimes people say, as a way of an allegation on Islam, oftentimes, unfortunately, in this day and age, such individuals happen to call themselves Muslims as well. That no, polygamy is not allowed, polygamy is a bad thing, and this and that. Everything which is mentioned by Allah the Almighty is mentioned as a cure. It is mentioned as a solution. If somebody has flu, you cannot give that individual the medicine that you would give to a cancer patient. Every patient, every case, every disease has a separate cure to it. Similarly, when you talk about the underlying reasons for polygamy, when those reasons exist, then polygamy is the solution. And Islam did not initiate polygamy, rather Islam restricted polygamy. This is something which I mentioned in the previous class as well, that in previous religions, there were individuals who used to have 700 wives. Regarding Hazrat Krishan alayhi salam, who was a prophet who came in India, regarding him it is narrated that he had thousands of wives. Regarding the father of Hazrat Ramchandra ji alayhi salam, who was also a prophet of God who came in India, whom the Hindus of this day and age consider as an avatar of God. Regarding his father, it is mentioned that he had multiple wives. Regarding the ancestors of Isa alayhi salam, which are mentioned in the Bible, such as Dawood alayhi salam, David, and Solomon alayhi salam, Sulaiman alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, so on and so forth, Musa alayhi salam, these biblical prophets, they had many, many wives. Oftentimes, these numbers are exaggerated, yes. But to say that, if regarding a prophet of God, it is mentioned that he had 700 wives, and you say the number is exaggerated, it is actually 10 or 20, still understandable. So, in Islam, in that context, in that era, people used to have as many wives as they could have, as they wanted to have.